Well, what is going on YouTube? How you guys doing today? So, on the table in front of us, we've got something relatively new from the folks over at Kansept Knives. And I know there have been a lot of Kansept Knives on the channel lately, but they are a generous company. They're willing to share their stuff with me, and keeping the content rolling means that when a company as prolific as Kansept says, "Do you want to check out our knives?" you say yes, and then you get a ton of knives to look at. You'll notice that I have not reviewed all of their knives, and it's because I don't review knives that don't work for me. There are some small knives coming from them that Women Carry Knives is probably going to look at, and I might do a couple of those. But I review the knives that I like, or at least the ones that I find interesting, and this is one of those. This is the Kansept Delta. It is designed by Jelly Jerry. He has a really great Instagram page if you're curious about how he does his work and how his designs come to life. This is a nice, big, beefy knife, which is very nice. It has a funky blade. The handle itself is very comfortable, almost straightforward in its design. Nice big choil here, which for my hands, of course, fits very, very well, but for some of you, this might be a little big up front. But the blade is where the party's at. That's where we're going to start. It is a Tanto recurve with a bunch of belly at the front. And when I first got this thing out of the box, I was like, well, nah. But, I don't have a recurve issue. We've talked about this many times on this channel. I use a combination of rods, and I use a ceramic rod for my basic cleaning up after I've been using it. And to be quite frank, this thing has, as all of the Kansept knives have done, particularly in their S35VN, has held its edge beautifully. So, I know a lot of you aren't going to be into it because of that recurve, but, for the work I do, which is particularly breaking down boxes when I'm at work, this thing really does the job well. And so that's a real high point for me. The blade itself is interesting in design. It's got a beautiful swedge across the top. It's got a nice little ramp right here for your thumb. It is nice and big, as I've said. The sharpening choil is done very well, although because of the recurve, you could probably grind that recurve out and still have plenty of blade if you were into it that way. It's got a pivot collar here that happens to be in bronze on this side as well. It has a very nice pocket clip that has good spring and plenty of ramp. It holds in the pocket very, very well. It does have a lanyard hole right there, which is just exactly big enough to get 550 paracord through, if you're into that sort of thing. It's a frame lock, as you can see, and our lockup is just about 45%. Zero rock or wiggle. The action on this thing is just excellent. Now, you may have noticed that it does have thumb studs and a flipper tab, and it is a front flipper. Well, let's show you that again. Thumb studs, front flipper, flipper tab. Oops. I haven't missed with this since the day I got it. Anyway, there you go. You can front flip with it, no problem. The thumb studs work very, very well. And of course, the flipper tab works exceptionally well. Now, I like multiple forms of deployment. The fact that the plunge grind comes all the way back to the scale here, and then the thumb studs are actually a little bit in the way of the cutting path. I think this knife would have been really, really served to just be either a front flipper, to be a front flipper and have the flipper tab if they wanted, or, you know what I mean? They didn't really need, but anyway, Jelly Jerry likes interesting designs, and this is one of those. All of the deployment methods work just fine, although if you have smaller hands, the front flip is much harder. So just be aware of that. But I'll tell you, the thumb studs are fantastic. But of course, the flipper works beautifully as well, and that tends to be where I deploy the knife. It's all titanium. It's running on bearings. It is S35VN, as I have mentioned many times. And again, the S35VN, when done by Kansept Knives, just seems to be really excellent. I have never had a problem. It's got a little bit of milling here to give the basic titanium scales a little bit of style. They make a version of this that has an insert that's blue and black that's right here. So there's a couple of versions of this. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you probably don't. It is definitely the kind of knife that inspires opinion, because it is not it's not a super basic design. It's got some complexity to it, and that's where feelings come in. How do you feel about the knife? You know, if something like this, which we're going to use here now since it's out as a size comparison, the Presidio 2 is your idea of a knife, or more particularly, if its little brother here, the Mini Presidio 2, is your idea of an EDC, then the Kansept Delta here is probably not going to be for you. It is big, it is relatively heavy, it is complex in design. But, you know, and I say this all the time, so I'm going to say it again now just because it holds sort of eternally true. The lovely thing about knives is that everyone can have their own taste and no one is wrong. If you like basic, straightforward knives like these, you don't have to buy those. If you like complex, interesting knives, there's a whole market just for you. I like both, which means this is a really, unfortunately, expensive and sort of joyful time to be a knife collector for me. It's like a never-ending parade of things I really want to have. But hey, so as here we are on the size comparison, as you can see, it is longer, just a little tiny bit longer in the blade and a little bit shorter in the handle than the full-size Presidio 2. And if we put the Mini Presidio up here, you can see, and of course this is very similar to the Bug Out in overall dimensions. It's a little thicker, but the length and stuff. You can see this is just a much bigger knife than the Bug Out, or in this case the Presidio 2. It is, I don't know, I dig it. I think it's fun to carry. It did take me a while, it really did, to get into this design. I have a bunch of Jelly Jerry stuff by way of Kubi and some other design and some other companies. And yet this thing really, this is some of the most different of his work that I've had. And so it took me a while to get into it. But really what it took for me to get into this knife was taking it to where I work and using it. And that sold me in the end. That was the end of it for me. If it does what I want it to, and it does it well, and it holds its edge like it's supposed to, and it rides the pocket comfortably and doesn't give me a hard time, I can get behind a knife, even if it's not something that I may have wanted or been into immediately. This was one of those. And yet, having had it for a while and worked with it for a while, I can tell you it is an incredibly competent cutter and a very, very useful EDC tool if you like bigger knives. You may not. So, what are we looking at? Well, overall is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and a quarter inches long overall. The blade itself is 1, 2, 3 and a half inches on 3.5 inches of S35 VN. The grip area from behind the flipper tab, 1, 2, 3, 4 full inches, which is why, as you can see, there's just a little tiny bit sticking out the end for me. But it's very comfortable in my hand because of the size. You can get your thumb right here if you do, you know, sort of long push cuts. You can come forward. You don't want to put your finger here, you will cut yourself. But you can come forward and put your finger down here if you're doing draw cuts. It is an exceptionally versatile and useful work tool, even though it is built with a ton of sort of unique style, which I'm down for. I actually really dig knives like this. I like knives that my first impression is like, nah, and then I have them for a while, and my whole attitude changes. Because that means there's something good about the knife itself, and it's not just an aesthetic thing. This definitely won me over in that regard. Let's use our old familiar tools to see what they kind of have offered us. The blade stock, which is nice and thick, S35 VN, but because this high flat grind does come down to a very nice edge all the way up and down the blade, it's still got some tape schmutz on it. Sorry about that. I use my knives, not as hard as many of you, but just the same, I do. If we come back here to the thickest point, it is 158 thousandths of an inch, or just over 4 millimeters. So it is a nice thick chunk of S35 VN. The blade itself, the blade itself. The handle at its thickest point, and since it's just flat slabs, that's anywhere along its length, just under 13 millimeters. There we go. Or just over a half inch, but not much, right? Closed profile on this guy is, well, what are we looking at? If we line it up So if we take the swell out and just line it up this way, you're looking at just about 1.5 inches, right? But of course it does protrude a little bit, which takes up a little more pocket space down at the base of the pocket. You have an interesting thing here where, so the flipper is not really a pocket pecker because of the shape. Sorry, Nick, I just love that phrase. This won't stab things in your pocket. But there are, now these are all knocked down, so they're not super sharp, but you'll contact the stuff in your pocket on this lip, and this lip. So you're not really going to want to carry your phone, for instance, in the front pocket with this, right? This is going to be in the knife pocket, phone, other pocket, or else you're going to bang it around a little bit. Let's weigh it. I've never actually weighed this knife. I have no idea how much it weighs. We're going to find out together. Excuse me. All right, in ounces, 5.4 ounces. Pretty average for a little over 8-inch titanium blade. I mean, titanium knife, right? That's not unusual. In grams, we are looking at 150. It's having a hard time making up its mind. So it's 155 grams, for those of you that care about grams. This is one of those knives that I get to, you know, if you'd asked me when I first got it, would you recommend this knife? I'd have been like, well, but here again, having used it, yeah, I can recommend this knife. If this look, this aesthetic appeals to you, then go grab one. They're not that expensive. I think they're less than $200 or right at $200. And again, they make one that's got a little darker titanium, and it's got blue and black inlay right through here. So they make a variation on this theme that's probably worth your attention. And in the end, that's where we're going to wrap it up. This is another excellent knife from Kansept. I have yet to get a bad knife from Kansept. And I'm not saying that. Look, I disclosed that they've sent me the knives because I want you guys to know where we stand. But I don't review knives I don't like. So if they sent me junk, I just wouldn't have reviewed them and sent them back. I would have, or sold, or whatever, traded them on, whatever. So far, every Kansept knife that has crossed my table has had a good grind, good materials. It has been built to good specifications. I have not had a single lemon come from them. And I think I've had 12 or 13 of the Kansept catalog. Kansept is by far my favorite company of 2020. And, you know, they're looking to, you know, they're my favorite new company of 2020, I should say. Let's be clear. My hope is that they continue on the same arc that they are on, because they are producing knives that are worth owning at prices that are a little lower than some of the other sort of high-end, you know, Chinese companies. But the knives are not lower in quality than those. And that's fantastic. That's really good. That makes me super happy. So there we are. This is the Kansept Delta. I have been a Therapeutic Edge. I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel on your way out. We'd love to have you here on a regular basis. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.